Chapter 34. As soon as the sun got high enough to be warm, Lorena spread their gear on trees and bushes to dry. It seemed astonishing to her that she was alive and unhurt after such a night. Her spirits rose rapidly, and she was even reconciled to having to ride the pack mule. But Jake wouldn't hear that. His own spirits were low. "I hate to squish every move I make," he said, "but I ain't supposed to get this wet in these parts." Now that the scare was over, Lorena found that she didn't mind that things were damp. It beat being hot in her book. The only awkward part was that the few foodstuffs they'd brought had been soaked. The flour was ruined, the salt a lump. At least the bacon and coffee weren't ruined, and they had a little of each before Jake rode off to look for her horse. Once he left, she went down to the river to wash the mud off her legs. Then, since the sun was already hot, she found a grassy place that wasn't too wet and lay down to have a nap. Looking up at the sky, her spirits rose even more. The sky was perfectly clear and blue, only whitened with sun over to the east. Being outside felt good. She'd spent too much time in little hot rooms, looking at ceilings. While she was resting, who should come riding up with her mare but Gus. "I hope there's still some coffee in the pot," he said when he dismounted. "I've usually had 10 biscuits by this time of day, not to mention some honey and a few eggs. Got any eggs, Laurie?" "No, but we got bacon," she said. "I'll fry you some." Augustus looked around with amusement at the muddy camp. "I don't see young Jake," he said. "Is he off preaching a sermon, or did he wash away?" "He went to look for the horse, only I guess he went in the wrong direction," Laurie said. Augustus took out his big clasp knife and cut the bacon for her. For a woman who had spent the night being drenched, she looked wonderfully fresh, young and beautiful. Her hair was not yet dry, the wet ends were dark. Occasionally a little line of water ran down her bare arm. Bending over the fire, her face was relaxed in a way he'd never seen it. The strain that always showed in Lonesome Dove, the strain of always holding herself apart, had disappeared, making her look girlish. "Well, Laurie," he said, "I guess traveling agrees with you. You look pretty as the morning." Lorena smiled. It was funny. Out in the open, she felt more at ease with Gus than she had in the saloon. "How long has Jake been gone?" he asked. "Not long," she said. "He rode down the river looking for tracks." Augustus laughed. Why, Jake couldn't track an elephant if he was more than 10 steps behind it," he said. "I guess we ought to call him back before he gets lost." He drew his pistol and fired a couple of shots into the air. A few minutes later, as he was finishing the bacon, Jake came galloping into camp, rifle in hand. Lorena was going around from bush to bush collecting the clothes, which the hot sun had already dried. "Gus, I didn't know we was going to have you for breakfast every day the whole trip," Jake said. "You was never grateful for nothing, Jake," Augustus said. "Here I returned a $50 horse that you couldn't have found in a week, and all you can do is gripe about my company." "Well, there's such a thing as too much of your darn company," Jake said, looking to see if Laurie was out of hearing. "Are you jealous or what?" Augustus asked. "Why wouldn't I be when you've tried to poke every woman I ever looked at?" Jake said. Whoa now," Augustus said. "I'm just eating my bite of bacon, but I will say you should have brought a tent if you mean to take a sprightly girl like Laurie out in the weather." Jake didn't intend to spend any time bantering about women with Gus. It was good they had the horse back, of course. "I reckon we'll pack up and move on to San Antonio," he said, just as Lorena came back with an armful of dry clothes. "I don't want to go to San Antone," she said. "I've been there." Jake was taken aback. "Why, it's a good gambling town," he said. "We ain't rich yet. It wouldn't hurt us to stop for a week while the boys get the herd started good, and then we can catch up." "I don't like to go back to places," Lorena said. "It's bad luck." Yes, and it would be worse luck to get up the trail and run out of money. That's all right, Jake, Augustus said, flinging the dregs of his coffee into the chaparral bush. I'll be happy to keep tabs on Laurie while you run into town and lose your wad. What makes you think I'd lose it? Jake said, his face darkening. You'd lose it if I was around, Augustus said. And if I wasn't handy, you'd probably get in a scrape and shoot another dentist. Besides, if anybody with a badge on is trying to hunt you up, I think the first place they'd look is San Antonio. If anybody with a badge on comes looking for me, he's apt to find more of me than he wants, Jake said. Let's get packed, Laurie. We might make town tomorrow if we push on. I don't want to go to San Antonio, Lorena said again. She knew Jake hated to be contradicted, but she didn't much care. Before she could think, he whipped around and slapped her. Not hard, but it was a slap. Darn it, I guess you'll go where I say go, he said, his face red with anger. Lorena felt embarrassed to have been hit in front of Gus, but he seemed uninterested in what she and Jake did. Of course, he was just being polite. What else could he do? She remembered all the money Xavier had pressed on her. It was lucky she had it. She looked at Augustus again and saw that he was quietly watching, waiting to see how she would handle Jake, who was glaring at her, expecting her to cry, probably. But it had taken all the fury of the storm to make her cry. A little pop from him was just something to be ignored. She turned her back on him and walked off to start the packing. In a minute, Jake cooled down sufficiently to come over and squat by the fire. I don't know what's wrong with Laurie, he said. She's getting touchy. Augustus chuckled. You're the one that's touchy, he said. She didn't slap you. Well, by God, why would she buck me? Jake asked. I'm the one that decides where we go and when we stop. Well, you may be and you may not be, Augustus said. Maybe it ain't that simple. It'll be that simple, or she'll have soon seen the last of me, Jake said. I doubt she'll miss you, Jake, Augustus said. You got your charms, but then I got my charms, too. I'll come and make camp with her if you decide you've had enough of her sass. I ain't violent like you, neither. I didn't hurt her, Jake said. He felt a little guilty about the slap. It had upset him to ride in and see her sitting there with Gus, and then she bucked him. Gus always managed to aggravate whatever situation he was in with a woman. I've got to go, Augustus said. Captain Call will be mad as a hornet if I don't get back. Much obliged for the breakfast. That's 2 you owe us, Jake said. I hope you'll ride into town and buy us a feed when you're up that way. Well, the 2 of you won't be in town, Augustus said. He trotted down to where Lorena was quietly packing the mule. Don't forget to hobble that mare, he said. I guess she ain't as tired of Lonesome Dove as we are. She was on her way back home when I came across her. I'll hobble her, Lorena said. She gave Gus a grin. Jake's little flare-up had not affected her good spirits. If you get any prettier, you won't be safe around me, Augustus said. I might be forced to cut the cards with you again. No, I told you we're going to play a hand next time, Lorena said. It'll give me a better chance. You look out for yourself, Augustus said. If that scamp runs off and leaves you, why, come and get me. You can find us by the dust. He won't leave, Lorena said. He'll be fine. She watched Gus swim the muddy river. He waved from the other bank and soon disappeared into the brush. She went on packing. Soon Jake couldn't stand it and walked over. You oughtn't to provoke me like that, he said, looking a little hangdog. He tried putting his hands on her, but Lorena shrugged them off and went to the other side of the pack mule. I wasn't provoking you, she said. I just said I wasn't going back to San Antonio. Well, darn it, I'd like to gamble a little somewhere between here and Denver, Jake said. Go, gamble, she said. I never said you couldn't. I'll stay in camp. Oh, no doubt you've made arrangements with Gus, Jake said. I guess he's planning to come over and teach you card tricks, he said bitterly and turned on his heel. Lorena didn't mind. It was too pretty a day. The fact that Gus had found her horse was a good sign. She felt like riding, even though the country was brushy. She felt like a lope, in fact. Jake could sulk if he wanted to. She was looking forward to the trip.